Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. My guest is Ethan Bensdorf, second trumpet of the New York Philharmonic. And before we get started, I would like to thank my sponsors, Dylan Music. You can visit them at dylanmusic.com and be sure and give them the passcode or the discount code DULAN5 and you get 5% off of your purchases. Also, thank you to Euclid IQ, the world's leading company in audio and video compression. Visit them at euclidiq.com. And also, please check out Studio 259 Productions. That is where you can get all the Vincent Chikowicz pedagogical materials. And we have a new website where you can hear Tom Rolfe's playing the long tone exercises. So please check all that out. But without any further ado, Ethan, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to finally have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we get into kind of your more distant past, let's talk about what happened with the pandemic and how you started playing from your apartment and everything that happened around that.
Sure, it seems like a lifetime ago now at this point. Time does not really exist for me anymore, I'm sure for a lot of us. I guess, things shut down like the middle of March, and it was kind of like a what do we do now phase for a while. And I remember seeing a good friend of mine, Marlon Humphreys. He is a trumpet player in Brazil, and he studied in Chicago. He went to Roosevelt, and we played in Civic together. We went to PMF together in Japan, and a great trumpet player. Like he is a big inspiration for me. And I saw these videos of him playing off of his, I assume, balcony or through his window or something out into this huge cityscape. And the sound just echoed, and it was amazing. He would play like orchestral excerpts kind of, and he would get this applause, and it was just magical. And so I thought, man, this would really work in New York. And when kind of all over the country, I think too, during the shift change, people would go out in their windows and their balconies and the rooftops and applaud the healthcare workers and the essential workers, frontline workers. So after about a week of doing that from the window, I would open the window. I was like, oh, I'll go up to the roof, and there were people out there, applauding, banging on pots and pans. And I thought, I have something that makes noise too. I'll bring my horn up here. So I started playing different tunes every night. I think the first night I went out there was April 4th, and I think I did 57 nights in a row. Different tune every night, never repeated anything. I sort of took a back seat once the city started waking up. It only works when no one has anything to do and it's quiet. And New York is kind of a funny place, and most of the time people don't really want to hear other people's noises. And I was sort of waiting for the New York moment for someone to yell, "Shut up!" or something, tell me to stop. But it never came, and every night more and more people came out, and there was more support, and I would get social media messages of support, and people would tell me how much it was impacting them and how it was the highlight of their day. And it was just amazing how everything was, music was connecting to people, and it really showed how much people were missing live music and music in general. And it's amazing the power of music and what it can do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it affected so many people. I mean, I know that, I'd certainly look forward to seeing them, but you had other people around the country watching them, and, and as I was telling you, when we came on, it was kind of depressing because, like, you sounded so great, and then I was like, oh, it's an iPhone camera, and he's playing one-handed. And everything was great, like all the Piano Man and all this kind of stuff. It was so good. When did you start getting attention with the media from that?
I don't. Again, time doesn't really exist. I have no idea. The New York Philharmonic had nothing really going on at that point. Everyone was trying to figure out what to do, and so there were videos posted on we have a New York Philharmonic musicians Instagram page and Facebook page that was posted there. A video. The New York Philharmonic posted a video. I don't know. And then some local news did a piece on how professional musicians are getting creative, performing for other people. You know, there are other musicians in the Philharmonic. One of our percussionists was doing DJ sets live on Instagram for people. One of our flute players was playing in her stairwell for her neighbors. I mean, it was kind of cool to see what other people were doing and how, you know, we go from like just this crazy busy schedule of rehearsing and performing and practicing and making sure we're always at the top of our game to literally nothing.
Yeah.
And when I remember the very last dress rehearsal we had, the last thing like normal that I did, we played, Gergiev was conducting Petrushka, and we had a dress rehearsal on Thursday morning, and we were all sort of waiting for it to come. Like, there's no way we're going to play this round of concerts. And I remember I was like, man, this is sounding so good. Like everything, Petrushka with Gergiev, like how cool is that? And I went home and I was just waiting for the email, and the email sure enough came, and everything was canceled. Yeah. And sort of indefinitely. And I was like, well, now like I have nothing to do. I have nothing to play for. And so what the sort of rooftop thing did was just it helped give me a reason to play.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of inspired some other people to do it, you know?
Oh, come on. Yes.
Hey, Jason.
Hey.
I surprised you, and now you surprised me. Look at that.
How you doing, Jason?
Good.
Good. Jason's kind of my neighbor.
Yeah?
Yeah, about 10 minutes away.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, Jason's dad and I went to school together and played quintet together. So
that's great.
Jason, what happened the first time when did you first hear Mr. Bensdorf play off the balconies? Do you remember that?
I don't really remember exactly when. I don't remember the date.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was sometime in like April.
Sometime in April. So for people who don't know, Jason played outside the Decatur Hospital 100 days in a row? Right?
Yes. Not in a row, though.
Not in a row, but still, you played 100 days. That's 100 more than I did. So, so can you talk about that? I mean, you saw Mr. Bensdorf doing that. Is that one of the things that kind of made you want to do it?
Yeah, seeing Mr. Bensdorf do it on Instagram made me want to go and play at the hospital.
Yeah, yeah. And how did this just work? Because you guys were both national celebrities. I mean, Jason, you were on Good Morning America. Am I right? Good Morning America, CBS Sunday Morning. Am I right?
Yeah.
Did I leave anything off, like Meet the Press or anything like that?
NBC and yeah, quite a few.
Quite a few, right? Right. So, how did you guys hook this up when you were going to be on it was the inaugural parade around the country, right? What was the title of that? Was that right, the right title?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that happen, Ethan? How did you guys make that go?
Well, I got a message from Karen, from Jason's mom. I think through Instagram, and then Nate, Jason's dad, also messaged me, and Colin Williams, who's the associate principal trombone in New York, was principal trombone in Atlanta. So there's this connection there, and Colin gave you guys, I guess, my information, and I got these messages on my phone, and I was looking at them like, come on, this is a joke. There's no way this is happening. But I had seen, of course, Jason and all his success and his celebrity status growing, and I was like, oh, Jason's playing at the inauguration. That's awesome. And then wait, they want me to play too? Like, how cool is that to play a duet together? That's awesome.
Yeah, that was really great. Jason, what did you think about that when you found out that was going to happen?
I was really excited.
Yeah, yeah. And anybody can see this, right? It's easy to find on YouTube, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was really cool. And is that the first time you guys had talked to each other? Was over the internet before this happened?
Yeah, I think early on, when Jason, when you started playing at the hospital, you sent me a message saying that you had gotten some media attention, and you sent me a link to a story that you were a part of, and you had you had mentioned that I had helped inspire you, and that was so touching to me. And so that was sort of our first communication about that. And then when this whole thing with the inauguration came up, we organized a little FaceTime session just to sort of get acquainted with the duet that we were playing. And Jason played it through, and I was like, oh great, that'll be easy to follow, no worries. So
Yeah. Jason hears a lot of great brass playing between studying with Stewart and playing with his dad every day. So, you know, he set up pretty well.
that's right.
I actually teach the kids that are in Jason's class. You know that, Jason?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, don't worry. That's you don't have those advantages. but but that's great, Jason, that you did that, and I really appreciate you coming on, and I think everybody really appreciates what you did, and I love seeing you guys pop up on that thing first, you know. And Jason, what kind of C trumpet did you wind up buying, by the way?
A Bach Philly.
Yeah, the Philly, right? So, Ethan, I don't know if you know this, but Jason, what was the deal you made with your parents about buying a C trumpet?
If I made it into the high school GMEA, then they would buy me the Bach C trumpet.
And you won.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations, buddy. That's great.
Thank
All
you.
right. All right, well, Jason, I'll find out how much you charge for lessons a little bit later, okay? All right. Jason, thanks so much. Good to see
Good to
you.
see you, man.
Okay.
Bye.
Surprise.
That's awesome. I love that you did that.
So, anyway, yeah, so people should check that out. And he is set up really well.
Yeah, yeah. It was easy. I mean, obviously, to play with him,
Yeah.
but you know, he's in good hands. He knows what's going on,
Yeah.
and I look forward to seeing where he goes.
I know. I know. It's and this is a good segue because I wanted to talk about how you started on the trumpet, kind of even before we get to your lessons as a kid. But can you just talk about how the trumpet came to you?
Yeah. So I went to Interlochen Arts Camp up in Michigan. My mother had gone for I think 4 summers. My older sister had gone. My older sister is an oboe player, and I remember when my sister was there, my parents we would go up there and visit her. And I grew up in Chicago, so it was about a 5-6 hour drive up to northern Michigan, Traverse City area, and I loved it when I first got there as like a 5-year-old kid. Seeing my sister as a camper was one of the coolest things, and I couldn't wait to put on the uniform myself. We had to wear uniforms at Interlochen, and it was so. My first summer there, I went when I was 10 years old, and I went for 4 weeks away from home as a 10-year-old kid, which was I remember spending a lot of time at the payphone calling home. And I didn't play the trumpet yet. I think I took an acting class and an art class, maybe some pottery. I sang in the choir, and I took a class called Instrument Talent Exploration, something like that, music talent exploration. And every day we tried a new instrument. So, you know, we spent a day on the violin, we spent a day on the bassoon. We went through all the different instruments and all the different families. And so we got to the trumpet, and it was clear that this was kind of a natural fit for me. So and then the following fall after that summer was when I had to pick an instrument to play in the middle school band. So that worked out, and I picked the trumpet that way.
Which one of those instruments was the longest day?
I don't, it's, like I said, time is a funny thing for me.
I was just going to guess the clarinet. Um, so you started playing in middle school. How soon did you start taking private lessons once you were in school?
I think pretty almost right away. I think I remember taking some lessons so I grew up in Evanston, which is the same town that Northwestern University is. And so I was lucky that in that sense, I think I got hooked up with some college kids who needed some money, as I remember doing a lot of that myself. So I was this beginner kid, and I think I took some lessons from some college kids, and then eventually I got connected with Bruce Daugherty, who was my teacher throughout sort of late middle school into high school, and we're still in touch. He's a great guy, a great player, and just a true role model for me.
Yeah. What kind of things were you doing? I mean, what kind of things did Bruce have you doing early on?
It's funny, you asked Jason what kind of C trumpet he bought, and I think I was exactly the same age when I bought my C trumpet, my which I still have. That's the only C trumpet that I've ever owned.
Wow.
And I remember Bruce telling me I needed to get a C trumpet, and I was just starting to play in orchestra and youth orchestra in the Chicago area. And again, I went back to Interlochen for 7 summers total. So the first couple summers after that, I played in band, and then I started playing in orchestra. And so I brought this C trumpet, and Bruce helped me pick a C trumpet. I remember that very clearly. And he had a couple, and he would sort of have me play blindly, and he would close his eyes and he would tell me which one he preferred, and whichever one was in my hand, that's the one that I ended up buying.
Now, but do you still practice B flat trumpet a good bit?
I do. And I was teaching a lesson today, and I picked up my C trumpet to try to demonstrate something, and the valves kind of stuck. And I was like, well, that shows you how much C trumpet I'm playing these days. So, and it's funny, like when I was in school, when I was in college, no one played B flat. That was like the devil's instrument. And I never really understood why that was, but I would always warm up on B flat. I think for a while, and when I was in college, I was like, oh, B flat trumpet, no, I have to play only C trumpet. And then, but yeah, no, I play. I would say now these days, when not playing a lot of orchestra stuff, I'm playing mostly B flat trumpet.
Yeah, yeah. What do you remember working on as far as exercises, or how Bruce taught you? Because you obviously were developing correctly.
Um, You'll have to ask him about that. But I mean, Bruce is a Chickowitz student as well, so we did some Chickowitz studies, a lot of air conceptual things. I remember doing. He sort of dove into me, honestly, right away with sort of solo and orchestral repertoire, and got me to play a lot of music. And that was always his sort of philosophy too, which helped me, I think, shape me a lot with who I am as a player now, and that helped guide me along the musical route as a foundation.
Right. And then after high school, of course, you went to Northwestern. So can you talk a little bit about? Well, I should ask before that. I mean, when you were growing up in high school, what were you listening to a lot?
I would go to see the Chicago Symphony all the time. I would go and see Bud Herseth play. I had a lesson with him once when I was, I think, 14. I had braces. And I remember I remember 2 things from that lesson, and I tell this story a lot. So one is, I remember the only thing I remember playing for him was Pictures at an Exhibition, like the Promenade, when I was 14. And I remember playing it, and he goes, no, play like this. And he played it. And we were in this little closet at Orchestra Hall somewhere backstage. And it just, it sounded like enormous in this tiny little space. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. You want me to play like that? I don't know how to do that. But it was amazing to hear up close. I remember being totally floored by that. And then the second thing I remember was packing up for the lesson. He was telling me some story that I don't remember because I was still too nervous and freaked out the whole time. And I had one of those, I think it was a double or triple Pro Pack cases with a zipper all the way around. And I forgot to zip up my case, and I put it on my shoulder, and everything falls out. And he just didn't miss a beat and kept telling me whatever story he was telling me, and pretended like it didn't happen. But I'll show you actually really quick.
Yeah.
So after the lesson, I took a photo with him, And somehow my grandmother had some connection maybe to the board of the Chicago Symphony, and somehow she printed this photo and got it signed by him.
Well, that's
And I
cool.
had this photo. So this is, I don't know if you can sort of see this, I know the reflection
Yeah.
is there.
No, it looks good.
But so that's me with braces and Bud Herseth. And he signed it. He says, "Hi, Ethan. I know you will keep practicing, Bud Herseth." And so I've kept this. And this is still in like a really cheap, flimsy frame. I got to get a new one. But it was, and still to this day, one of my biggest pieces of inspiration.
Wow. And you were hearing him, this was in what, in the late 90s? Something like that?
Yeah, I mean, even before that, my parents would drag me to concerts when I was like 5 years old. I remember, and like I remember having a really hard time sitting still, but just the initial exposure to that was huge for me.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, early '90s. Yeah,
Wow. How old were you when you really had a concept that that's what you wanted to do?
probably early to mid high school. I mean, honestly, that lesson was, I think, a big turning point for me. Now looking back on it, just to be able to again be exposed to that kind of playing. I remember my parents recently moved about 5 years ago out of the house that I grew up in, and so I had to go and sort of sift through all of my old belongings, which I'm sure a lot of us have done. Um, and I remember I found this high school assignment of mine. I think it must have been my freshman or sophomore year of high school, and we had to. I remember we had to write a series of vignettes, and we had to like add photos to them. And one of my vignettes was about Bud Herseth. I remember reading it, and it's like, wow, like this clearly had an impact on me from even 14, 15 years old.
Wow. Wow. And then, so then you went to Northwestern for college and studied with Barbara Butler and also some, I'm sure, with Geyer and Chris Martin as well. Can you
Yep.
talk about the lessons with Barbara?
I always call her my trumpet mom, and I think a lot of people do. She would kick your butt if you needed it. She would be supportive if you needed it. I think what made her and Charlie so special and unique is that they cater to sort of every individual student's needs. They didn't have one set way of doing things for other people. It was okay. Well, what do you need? Let's tackle that.
Yeah.
And for me, and I think in general too, Barbara is all about the music, and she there's she would read magazines, and she would say, okay, your job is to get me to look up from my magazine with your playing. And I tell this story sometimes to students, and this is coming secondhand, so I could be butchering this story. So I apologize if someone actually knows the real version of this story. But apparently, she was giving a master class somewhere, and a student was playing, and she herself found herself not listening, and so the student had finished playing and looked up and was waiting for her to say something, and she said, "Well, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't listening. I stopped listening." And but this is a good learning experience. So she then gets up and she said, "Okay, I'm going to play same lick 3 different ways, and you tell me which way you like the best." So the first way, she gets up and she plays, and she's only thinking about trumpet material. So like, playing the right notes, playing in tune, playing with a good sound, triggering when you need to trigger, and the trumpet things.
Yeah.
The second way, she thought about what she was going to have for dinner. And the third way, she played it again, and she only thought about the musical part. Only thought about what she wanted to do musically with the line, with the lick that she was playing. And afterwards, she asked. She said, "Okay, now which way did she play?" And I'm sure she hammed it up a little bit, but
Yeah.
of course, everyone said, "Oh, the third way." And so she asked the student. She said, "When you were playing, what were you thinking about?" And the student said, "I don't know." And so that was sort of her a general philosophy of hers, and it was to always communicate something and tell a story with what you were playing, and
Yeah.
that really resonated with me always.
Do you remember there being any times in your own playing, working with her, that you had like an epiphany, like if there was a barrier broken down that all of a sudden kind of happened? Do you remember anything like that?
Honestly, every lesson felt that way.
Yeah.
It was just this constant like growth period, and she would never BS you. She would always tell you how it is, and I appreciated that so much. And I there's no way I would be close to where I am now, I think, without her guidance.
Well, and part of what made that experience unique, as we were kind of talking about before we came on, was like the ridiculous amount of talent you were surrounded by. Can you? I mean, I think we were like Matt Mucky, Karen Bliznick, Mike Martin, Jeff Strong, Carrie Schaefer, uh, Brandon Eubanks. Did I leave anybody out?
Amy McCabe was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, some other military band folks. I mean, it was like a talent pool that you just were swimming in every day, trying to stay afloat.
Were there any things that you kind of observed from your colleagues that you go, oh, I should do that, or
Every day, absolutely.
right?
I mean, that's what was so great about that sort of community aspect of being at Northwestern at that time, was everyone was so great but so different. And so and Barbara would always say, she would hear someone do that she couldn't do, and instead of saying, wow, that's amazing, that's great, she would say, wow, that's amazing, I want to be able to do that. And so she would take that on herself, and she would tell us about her journey with something like that, and we would all be so inspired to sort of take that. And I remember, every week we would have a studio class, and a lot of the time she would have us, coach each other. And so we would always have to say what we liked about this person or that person. And I remember one class in particular about sound. We had a sound class, and every person would go around the room playing their favorite note. One note, play it, and with your best sound. And we would have to go around the room and sort of describe everybody's sound and what we liked about it, and how we wanted to maybe incorporate that in our own sound and our own playing. And it honestly taught me how to listen and appreciate and sort of adjust and be inspired by everybody around me. And of course, like you said, there was a lot of talent there, so it was easy to do that.
Yeah.
But we were so supportive of each other, and it was a great environment.
Well, that's one thing I've always noticed about the people that have studied with Barbara and Charlie, is the positiveness behind it, and I think also the belief that anything is possible. That's I remember. I mean, I hope she won't get mad if I tell the story and I'll leave the person's name out. But she was talking about somebody who came and gave a master class once, and then she said it took months for people to recover because that person was so negative, and she wanted to keep that so positive. So it has to be like that for the amount of success you guys all had at one time. So yeah, and of course she's very particular.
Well,
Well,
leads to her success and to everybody else. I mean, we all are. We all have to be, right?
exactly. What kind of things did you pick up, would you say, from Charlie, Geyer, and Chris around that time? Do you remember those things too? Probably similar.
Similar, yeah. I mean, just listening to them play was a true honor, and I felt so lucky just to be in the same room with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chris got to Chicago, I think I want to say my junior year. So I didn't have that much time with him when he was in Chicago, but we sort of had maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 lessons a year
Yeah.
with him. But it was great to just hear them both play. Yeah.
Now you have a lot of time with him. So
Exactly. Yeah. Too much time. No, never too much time. Never enough time. I miss him.
I'm sure. What was your schedule like as a student? Do you remember? Were you like an early practicer, late practicer? How did you space things out?
I think I tried a lot of different things. I remember I would see other people and their practice habits, and it was hard for me not to try to do what they were doing,
Right.
because I'm like, well, they're really good, and they start at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're the first ones in the practice room, so maybe I should do that. So I would try that, and that never worked for me.
Yeah.
I can make it happen if I need to, but I'm not a huge early morning guy. And then I would see people who would be the last people out of the music building, and break into other buildings on campus after they closed so that they could practice. And I tried doing that, and that didn't work because my brain was just fried, and my face was fried.
Right.
So I sort of was just kind of experimenting a lot with it. And when you're in school, there's not a lot of time. They keep you really busy, and a lot of it's up to you to sort of figure out how to structure your time. And I think I'm still figuring that out, especially these days. Um,
Right. Were there people like, I mean, I know when I went to school with Mike Deshaun. The first time I heard Mike play, I thought, well, he's going to get a job. And that was kind of like done deal, right? I mean, did you have that same reaction with some of your colleagues there too? Like, were you aware that that was a special
oh
time?
yeah, yeah. I remember my freshman year, like one of the first. So the first, like, um, when everyone comes back from summer break, the first couple of studio classes are always people playing solo with piano. Um, that's how they would structure it, and they would always start with the new people. I think, or maybe they start anyway. I don't remember. But just hearing the very first studio classes of people getting up there and playing a piece, a performance, the very first thing I heard as a college student was just like mind blowing. I was like, and I had never really done that. Like, I didn't do a lot of recitals. I didn't have a lot of. I played in orchestras, but getting up in front of your peers and your colleagues is the hardest thing to do. And I tell people too, like, every Wednesday at noon, I still start shaking because that was when studio class was. And it's like forever ingrained in my brain of that terrifying time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I remember having to do some festival audition after Amy McCabe one time. She played right before me, and I was outside waiting to go in, and she played, and I remember, I think she played Pulcinella, and it was just like so sparkly. And she is one of my favorite players. I love her as a human. I love her as a player. And seeing and hearing her come out of that room, I was just like, wow. And I went in after her, and I was like, why am I even here? But and yeah, that happened all the time.
Yeah. And so also, I mean, in addition to developing, and I'm sorry, I live near a firehouse. If anybody's picking up the sounds out there,
Sounds like New York.
well, yeah, it's like New York except not. But so so do you remember? Were you also kind of working on the mental game at the same time? I mean, in addition to the trumpet stuff.
Always. I'm
Yeah.
still working on it. We all are. I mean, it's yeah, it doesn't get easier, I will say. But we all try to figure out our own ways to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, it's a constant battle for sure.
Yeah. So after Northwestern, I know you were going to take a little time off, but you wound up like winning a job. So can you talk about the first job you had in Naples a little bit?
Yeah, I was very lucky. Right before graduation, there was a 1 year audition for Jim Stevenson's spot in the Naples Philharmonic, and I went down and somehow managed to win that audition. And it was a great job. It's a great orchestra, great colleagues. I feel so fortunate to have had that opportunity. I learned so much from being there, from everyone, and they were all so generous with me, and sort of taking me under their wing, and it's my first like real professional experience. I mean, I played in Civic when I was at Northwestern, which was invaluable. I mean, that was amazing to have that experience too, to sort of bridge that student and professional life.
Yeah.
But playing in Naples was a tremendous joy. I'm still very lucky to have had that happen.
Did you notice any differences in your practice from when you were a student to going into Naples? Did any adjustments happen?
I mean, I had so much time all of a sudden. So the way Naples works, I don't. So have you been down to Naples?
I've been down to Naples and I played part of a season in Sarasota about a
Okay.
gazillion years ago. So
Yeah. So you know how the how the audiences are, and how
I,
this sort of structure of the season works, right? So typically, the meat of the season is like, no, starting November, and goes through like April or so. And on either end of that is fairly light stuff. So when I first got there in September, I didn't have that much to do. We did some educational concerts, which was great. But it was kind of slow getting started with the season, and which was great for me again, because I was this, fresh out of school, learning the ropes kind of thing. And I just remember having so much time. Plus in Southwest Florida, it is hot in September. So I was very thankful for air conditioning. And, I knew I was only in a 1-year position. So I was also sort of thinking about what I was going to do after that 1 year was over. And so there were a bunch of auditions that happened right away when I first got there. And so I think the timing worked well in that I had all this time to prepare, and I was practicing way more than I ever did in school. I had all this time. It was great.
yeah. And so obviously during that year, the Philharmonic audition came up. So can you kind of talk about that process?
Sure. So right before I went to Naples, actually, I recorded the preliminary round. So that particular audition, I believe every single prelim was every single person who wanted to audition the New York Philharmonic is an open call institution. So anyone who wants to audition can. And so the whole preliminary round was done by tape.
Right.
And so I remember the last thing I did at on the Northwestern campus was record this tape. And I remember almost not sending it in because I didn't think it was good enough. And I remember sitting in my old room in my old house, like the house I grew up in, like just trying to figure out how to put it onto a CD and send it. And I remember listening over and over again. Oh well, I did it, so I might as well send it. And
Yeah.
so I passed on to the semifinal round. I think I want to say there were 9 of us maybe that went into a live semi in New York. And there were 2 parts to that semifinal. There was a, typical on stage by yourself playing through excerpts round. And then they called me back to play some section stuff with Phil. So Phil came behind the screen and we played some stuff together. And I came back maybe a couple days later and did a final round. And there were 2 of us. And then, so we did, there was a solo part, which was Bruce Broughton, Oliver's birthday. That was the solo on the audition. Thanks, Phil. And then again, like solo excerpts. And then again, some stuff with Phil. And I remember just thinking I completely tanked, especially the solo. I remember going in there. I had a rehearsal with the piano player the day before, and I thought it was great. I'm feeling good. And then I got on stage, and the screen was down, and I walk out, and I see the entire New York Philharmonic brass section and Lauren Mozelle sitting there, and I'm like, wow, this is what am I doing here? And this goes back to the mind games, right? I mean, they're always there, and they creep in at the worst times. And so luckily I sort of was able to somehow compose myself after that and got through the audition. But I remember, again, I tell the story all the time, but I remember not seeing on the audition materials when they sent it to me that rotary trumpet was required. And I didn't own a rotary trumpet, and Jim Thompson, sorry, Jim Stevenson. Hey, Jim Thompson. Jim Stevenson I left a rotary trumpet down in Naples, and 3 days before the audition, I got it and was like trying to play around on it, and it's not the best horn to play. And again, like I am not super familiar with playing rotary trumpet in general, so
Yeah.
that was a struggle for me on that audition. And I remember after the final round, it was down to me and Mike Deshaun, and Mike and I were sitting in the personnel office, sort of waiting for the result. And Phil Smith comes in. And he goes, "Well, the result is there is no result." And so he would sort of go through what each of us did, and he came to me and he goes, "Ethan, quite frankly, your rotary playing stinks." And I said, "I know, I'm sorry." And
Strong language for Phil.
yeah, it's right, exactly. So he, again, he was very matter of fact, very upfront. And so Mike and I both came back and played the same trial week with the orchestra about a month later, maybe 6 weeks later. I think it was over Thanksgiving week, actually.
Yeah.
And it was the only week that Mazel was conducting during that, like sort of in the near future. And so there wasn't a whole lot to play, but there was rotary trumpet on there. So we played, I think, Mendelssohn 4, and it was very strange having, like, both of us would sort of rotate in and out during the rehearsals, and the other one, when one person was playing, the other one was sitting directly behind. It was a very strange process. Luckily, Mike and I are like, we're cool. Hey, Mike. But it was a weird process. But again, like, I was so fortunate to observe, like, how it was going. And honestly, like, I feel like I learned so much just by sitting behind and watching, and being able to have that experience in addition to sitting in with the orchestra. Like, it was very much a learning experience for me, which was great. But so I think we did some brass quintet playing that week with the brass quintet, and I think we also did some extra section playing with the trumpet section on stage. And then I had to come back another week to play another trial week before I was hired. That one was fun. We did Shostakovich 4, and Mazel was not conducting. Mazel then deferred to the committee and said, "I'll trust whoever you want. Whatever you want to do is fine." And then there was a kids concert we played. I think Ives Variations on America was on that program. So there was stuff to play at that time. And then at the end of that week, which was, I think, in December of 2007, that's when they finally decided that I had gone through enough and had offered me the job, which was amazing.
What was that? Do you remember the first time when Phil came behind the screen? Because all
I
of a
think
sudden, that's like one of your icons walking back. Yeah.
so I walked out on stage, and I was warned that he was going to be sitting there. So I was like trying not to freak out. And I walked out on stage, and he was so nice and so gracious. And he, reached out his hand and we shook hands, and before COVID. And he said, "Hi, nice to meet you. Like, who are you? Where are you from? Like, what do you do?" And so I said, "Oh, well, I'm in the Naples Philharmonic in Florida." He goes, "You want to trade places?" He's like, "I'm ready to retire. Naples, Florida sounds pretty good right now." So he was good. He sort of put me at ease, and he was so just quiet and nothing. There was no ego. It was just, "Hey, let's play together."
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember anything that was on that round? Like what was the first thing you played and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm playing with Phil Smith. What's going on?"
I think we played some. I'm trying to remember. I believe we played some Bartok and Sheriff Orchestra, the second movement.
Yeah.
I think we played some Brahms. I want to say Brahms 2, maybe even Academic Festival Overture. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all a wash like most auditions are. So so then you got the job, and then were there any adjustments you made as far as your practicing or equipment even at that time to match?
So I'm the first one to admit that my low register was never a strength. And playing second trumpet, that you got to have that. You got to have it as a strength. And so I remember the first big chunk of time, before I would go to work, I would warm up playing those Phil Snedeker low etudes and the exercises at the front of the book, just to get my low register happening. I do remember in that audition, in the final round, we play the second trumpet miraculous Mandarin excerpt, and it ends on all those repeated low A articulations, and it was terrible when I played it. Very inconsistent. I remember Phil saying, "Can you do that again and watch those low A's, make it more consistent?" I said, "Sure." And then I did it again. It was maybe slightly better, but it was a thing. Articulating low and full down there was never easy for me, and I remember having to work on that a lot. The other thing too, I talk about this a lot, is the New York Philharmonic is known for putting out a lot of sound, the brass section especially. And of course, like, I'd heard all the recordings. I had heard the New York Philharmonic play live before, so I knew what I was getting into. But sitting in that section on that stage for the first time was, in the trial weeks too, was just like mind blowing. And I remember sitting on stage trying to figure out how these people, these seemingly like superhuman people, were playing with so much sound, but good sound. It was baffling to me. And so I then came to the word sustain, which I remember Mick Mulcahy saying to me in college all the time, sustain, sustain, with that Australian accent of his. And yeah, and I thought I knew what that was, and I thought I was doing that when I was in school, but it was not until I really sat down in that chair on that stage, surrounded by those people, that I had to understand immediately. I was like, oh, that is sustaining. That's what he was talking about. And so I was trying to just sort of figure out how to do that in an efficient way.
Yeah. How long was it? Did you notice that certain things in their playing started to creep into yours within a couple of weeks or months of playing with them?
Yeah, I mean, I had like, I think everything, you're sort of especially as a section player, you've got to be sort of this chameleon, and sort of adjust on a dime. But I do remember there was one, I'm trying to remember what year this was, and down in Sarasota, I played an Easter gig with Josh McClure, and Liam Day. And I remember during the service, we sort of traded off, verses on a hymn, and Josh leaned over to me. He goes, for the next verse, I want you to give me your best Phil Smith impression. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, and I was just like, but this seems so normal to me. Not that I sound anything like Phil, but I think that, of course, like, when you sit next to someone for so long, and that's my job, is to sort of blend with what's around me. And I don't think I necessarily knew that it was happening, but it was just my
Osmosis.
adjusting that was happening automatically.
Did you guys ever talk shop? Was there anything Phil ever suggested that, as you were kind of developing?
It might have been one of my trial weeks, but if not then certainly one of the first weeks on the job. He takes my mouthpiece and he looks at it. He goes, "No wonder you can go so long without taking a breath." And I was like, what does that mean? And so he, I'm not an equipment guy. I like I said, I've only ever owned one C trumpet in my life, in my career. And I played on a stock 1.5 C mouthpiece. That's what I won auditions on. That's what I won the job on. And that's what I started the job on. And he looks at it, he goes, "You need a bigger mouthpiece." He's like, you need to open that up a little bit. So I opened it up slightly. That was a good thing. That helped a lot. And I was always the guy to blame myself over the equipment. Always. I still am. It's my fault. It's not the equipment's fault.
Right.
but yeah, he did get me to play a slightly bored out mouthpiece, which helped.
Yeah. And I know you guys had a really good working relationship. Were there any funny things that happened on the job that you remember with him?
Um, one that sort of comes to mind, I think it was the very first Live from Lincoln Center concert that I played, uh, was opening night, and Mazel was conducting Chaik 4. He's gonna, if he's, well, I'm sorry, Phil. I don't, yeah, anyway, um,
Too late now.
that one lick, that bum, da da dum dum dum, silence, and then you have to come back in on that high flat, D, right? He cracked it, live on TV. That was also this like crazy new thing for me, was like having these cameras in my face, knowing that all these people are going to be watching on TV. And I remember he missed the note, and he stomped his foot so hard. He was really angry, but didn't change the sound. The sound was still as Phil Smith as it gets, right? And it was just seamless, but his foot almost went through the stage. And I remember being like, "Whoa, is he okay? Everything good? Cool. All right." The one other thing that came to mind was, again, Petrushka. We did this really cool production that I think the University of Maryland picked up, where all of the musicians were sort of part of this theatrical presentation, and there was staging and video projections and costumes, and so the orchestra wore hats and scarves, and we had to like get up and sit down and dance around sometimes. It was fun, and honestly, I appreciated it so much because it took some of the pressure off the music and reminded us, like, oh, we're actually having fun.
Right.
And that was great. But I think it was during one of these productions, when the ballerina dance starts, trumpet, bop, bop, bomb, and snare drum, right? So we get to this spot, and then Phil never starts. He never plays the little fanfare at the beginning, and then the snare drum doesn't play, and then the whole thing just stopped. And there was like this, it seemed like 5 minutes of silence, and I looked over at Phil. He was like ready to play. I'm like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden he just goes da da da, and then the snare drum was like da, da, and then he played, and it was flawless. But afterwards, he was like, "Oh man, I had a total brain fart. I thought the snare drum played first." But the whole time he was waiting for the snare drum to play before he played, which I thought was great.
That is funny. I mean, people don't realize he does have a pretty good sense of humor.
He does, yeah. Well, I mean, if you've seen those Smith Alessi videos, you can
They are funny.
get a good sense for them.
He was. I went to dinner with he and Brandon Craswell about a year and a half ago. Well, pre-pandemic sometime, because they brought their students from Georgia to hear Stewart play the Jolivet 2, right, which he absolutely pasted. And so we go to dinner, and I asked Phil. I said, "So when you did the excerpt CD, did you mean for there to be a pregnant pause after you said good luck in the Ravel Piano Concerto?" And he didn't acknowledge it. He just took a sip of his drink. He turned away, smiled, and never touched it.
Apple juice, though. He was drinking apple juice.
Oh, for sure. Or water. I think it was
Water. Yeah.
Oh, I think that made me drink water too. So I guess the same question goes for your other colleagues in the trumpet section with Chris and Matt and Tom. Were there ever any things that you kind of picked up from them, or suggestions that helped you get started on the job?
Well, I mean, certainly with Matt, I mean, we were classmates at Northwestern, so I remember hearing him all the time in school being like, well, it's just a matter of time before he wins a big job. And sure enough,
He did.
before he graduated from college, he won the associate principal job in the York Philharmonic. And I remember his senior recital. I've never seen so many people in a recital, because he had his recital after he had won the audition, and everyone packed in there. And I think he played Brandenburg. I mean, it was amazing. Oh, and I played on his senior recital too. We played the Bame Sextet, which was amazing. But I was like, come on, man! Why? There were so many people here. This is your recital, anyway. But yeah, again, the sounds, just hearing those sounds constantly around, and knowing that there's so much tradition passed on also is huge.
Yeah.
And it sort of became my job to help take that and keep it
Right.
going.
And speaking of the Philharmonic too, I mean, is this your 12th or 13th year in the orchestra?
Yeah, I guess 13. I started, in 2008.
So, before I ask about your bosses, are there any? I mean, are there any concerts that have stuck out in your mind in those 13 years that kind of as benchmarks or landmarks of some kind?
That Mahler 2 we did with Alan Gilbert for the 10-year anniversary of 9/11 was I think the highlight. That was amazing. I'm trying to think if that was my first time. That was my first real time playing Mahler 2 for sure.
Yeah.
And obviously the weight of the moment and the weight of the context behind what we were doing was so moving, and being on that stage and the energy that was around me and everyone was just incredible.
Yeah.
Lightning was everywhere. And that was some of the most inspiring playing I think I've ever heard from anybody.
Absolutely.
It was really incredible to be a part of that.
Yeah. Was there anything else that stuck out? I mean, that's a pretty high bar.
Um,
It's hard to think of other things with that as the context.
I remember hearing Chris's Ligeti when he played the Ligeti Masters of the Macabre.
Yeah.
That was like, I mean, obviously, like I've heard Chris play a lot, but hearing him play that was just like, it was. I mean, it was kind of validating too, being like, oh, obviously, like we hired him for a reason. He's Chris Martin, but like, and now he can get up and do that, and like, just like it's like nothing. And I'm sure if you ask him, he'll say the same thing. But it was nothing. But I've talked to his wife about it too. She hopes he never has to play that piece again.
I'm sure. I'm sure she was sick of that piece, especially.
But no, that was just an incredible moment too. Seeing him get up and do that was awesome.
Yeah. What about let's talk about your three bosses, Lauren Mazel and then Alan Gilbert and now Zap. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So can you talk about each of the three of them? I mean, Mazel hired you, but you said he's a little bit, maybe a little intimidating.
Yeah, I was always terrified of him. My goal for his so his final year was my first year. My first full season was his last full season.
Yeah.
And my goal was to have him not know who I was. And I think the only time he spoke to me was my very first week on the job. So my last concert in Naples was I think June 1st, and my first rehearsal in New York was June 3rd. And it was like no time, very quick turnover. And that first week on the job was Mahler 9 and Mazel's arrangement of The Ring Without Words. So we played the subscription, Mahler 9, and then we played Ring Without Words at Carnegie Hall, same week. And we were rehearsing, we did the dress rehearsal at Carnegie for his Ring Without Words, and he stops and he looks up and he says, second trumpet, more. I go, oh, okay. And that was it. That's the only thing he said to me. And so I played more, I think, and then he let it be. But that was it. And even when he hired me, he didn't really have much. We didn't have much interaction. But
And was that your first Mahler 9?
that was my first Mahler 9. Yeah.
That's quite a way to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think it was good because it didn't, like I said, such a quick turnover. It didn't really give me time to think. So I just went.
Yeah.
But
And I'm sure sitting next to Phil and the solo in the third movement must have been something else, right?
I was trying, like, just to stay focused on what I had to do.
Yeah.
Which proved to be very difficult. But
What about Alan Gilbert? Talk about the years with him.
he's great. I mean, his approach to music making, I think in general, is very sort of academic, and he's brilliant. He knows the score better than anybody. He's such a smart guy and a smart musician, and I think I owe a lot to him for helping my rhythm. He was very precise, and he never let the orchestra get away with not playing together.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and Yop is sort of the same way. Yop is very much into the, we have to play together kind of approach. And with Yop, he has a lot of very excited energy.
Yeah.
And Alan is a little bit more, I think, poised and I don't want to say controlled, but there was a lot of magical moments that happened, I think, in different ways from all three that I've worked with.
Right. And I'm looking at my question. Sorry. So let's talk about I want to ask you kind of more some trumpet nuts and bolts. Like, what is your well? I was going to ask you about your overall practice, but what's your warm up? What do you do to get your face going during the day? If it was normal times, not Corona.
I mean, what is normal times? I don't even know anymore. Let's see. I guess I try to hit everything, and I go through the checklist of, okay, I know this is sort of controversial, but with the mouthpiece, I go back and forth, right? So right now I play the mouthpiece for about 30 seconds to a minute, just to sort of get the vibration happening. And I was, my studies when I was younger through school was always big on the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
And that was a huge part of my playing. So I'm doing more, I go back and forth, but I'm doing it now. And I'll incorporate a lot of articulations on there too, because I think a lot of the mouthpiece playing is not only getting the vibration going, but also the precision and the pitch center also. I think that helps a lot for me, getting that sort of core in the sound. I'll start with the Chikowitz flow studies. That's one of the first things I'll do. I've been experimenting with lip bending these days, just to sort of help get everything more forward. That's sort of what I'm after. Getting the air going. Everything that I'm doing in my warm up usually is just to try to get the air moving.
Right.
And articulation helps with that, but I'll, single, double, triple, and high and low and everything in between. I remember sorry, this is getting off topic. I don't know if you want to.
Whatever you want to talk about.
So between Phil and Chris, there was a gap of about 3 years maybe. And Matt moved up he was basically acting principal, and he was acting principal, and I was sort of acting associate principal. So going from that second trumpet role to playing a lot of first trumpet was hard for me, because I was so used to being in that sort of second trumpet zone. And I remember actually one of Yop's, maybe not his very first engagement with the New York Philharmonic, but one of them. He was conducting before he was music director. He did Beethoven 7, and Matt was like, "I'm taking the week off. Have fun." I'm like, "Oh, cool, okay." And for whatever reason, there is a stigma with playing first on Beethoven 7. And I had, the rotary trumpet that I play at work is a Monka, and it has no pinky
the clapping,
hole cover. And so I'm trying to play these high A's on this rotary trumpet that I don't really enjoy playing anyway. And each service got progressively worse. And by the last concert, almost nothing was coming out. And I remember just sort of in the concert, putting my horn on my lap, and Yop looked up, he looked over at me, and I just kind of shrug, and he kind of shrugs. And like, I was trying to get as much out as I could. It was not a fun day. And I remember calling Barbara right after that. And I said, "Barbara, help. Like, this just happened. Like, what's happening?" She's like, "Well, tell me about your warm up." I said, okay. It's like, when do you approach the top of the staff? When do you go above the staff in your warm up? I said, I don't. For so long, because like I said, like at the beginning, I would start on those low exercises and start that to get my low register going, and playing a lot of second trumpet. A lot of it's low register, and I was this power player that I would just sort of push enough to get the highs out, and that's how I would get them out. I would sort of muscle them out, which is not, I don't recommend that.
Yeah.
And so she was like, well, experiment with that, try to make sure that you hit the upper register more in the warm up. And it's like stretching. You have to stretch in a way that allows you to do the job that you're about to do. So if you're running a marathon, you have to make sure that you train for it. You make sure that your body is used to the motions that you're about to go through. So my warm up is just sort of constantly changing around based on what I think that I need at the time, I guess.
Yeah. So, how much rotary trumpet do you play now?
Um,
If you were on the job, I would say.
okay, because I was going to say, honestly, I don't even know where it is at the moment. If I know something is coming up, I'll do some etudes on it and prepare that way. But in my experience, I sort of the less I have to worry about it, the more mentally sane I am. So, but it's one of those things. It's a mental thing, right? I mean, and now that I have that experience, and forever Phil's words of, quite frankly, your rotary playing stinks is in my brain. Thanks, Phil. So it's always, every time I have to pick up that instrument, it's always like here we go again. Okay, let's see if we can make it happen. And then having that Beethoven 7 experience too didn't help. But it's always a mental strength thing. And playing an instrument, playing the trumpet is a lot of that. Is a lot of trying to overcome any mental hurdles we come across.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, because that's the tough thing, right? I mean, especially in our developmental years. I mean, somebody can say one thing to you and it sticks with you forever, and you think that that's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite piece to play that is not a prominent trumpet piece?
I mean, does Brahms count? I don't know.
It can. Yeah.
Like, I love hearing my colleagues play Brahms. The woodwind section, the horn section, string section. It's just like, I feel like I'm swimming in this like glorious sound all the time.
Yeah.
To the point where I feel completely inadequate every time I have to play, because I feel like I'm ruining it every time.
By the way, is that the same Are you playing the same Munker rotary still?
So yes, but the horn that Jim Stevenson had left in Naples is a different horn. So so when I first started in New York, Phil had bought a set, or Phil had the orchestra buy a set of Munkas that have been there, and that's the instrument that I played since I started the job here. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to let the rotary thing go, but since you brought up Brahms, I thought I would ask. So talk a little bit about your teaching, because now you're teaching Manhattan School of Music. How long have you been there?
I think 7 years, maybe.
Yeah. So, and I've asked a lot of people these kind of questions. I mean, like, since the pandemic has happened, I mean, what has changed with, the outlook of orchestras? Things are different right now. They're going to be different for a little while. I guess it's got to be tough to be a student right now because of the uncertainty. When we were in school was bad enough, right? But now it's got to be absolutely multiplied. I mean, how do your students react to that, and how do you keep their heads above water with that?
Yeah, I'm sort of taking the opposite approach, and I'm saying, now is actually a great time to be a student, because you don't have anything to lose right now, and take also your teachers have a whole lot more time to devote to you at the moment, which is great. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have this ability to work in that sense and to devote so much more time to the students. I think it's great for them and for me. It keeps me it keeps me sane too. But you know, I think the orchestra might look a little different in a few years. And my maybe this, I don't know, but I think it's possible that there could be a lot of auditions that happen in a couple of years down the line, you know, with either orchestras not surviving or with, you know, individual players not being able to survive and or wanting to pursue other career paths,
Right.
which is, you know, a definite possibility. But I tell people now is a great time to be a student because you have all this time to learn before you get out into the job market. And there will be jobs, but you know, and you have all this time from you, hopefully, and also your teachers, and absorb everything you can right now because you know, if you were in the professional world right now, things are different. Things are not as optimistic, or maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything is up in the air, right? But being a student, you have that stability of still being a student,
Right.
and so take as much in as you can right now, and so hopefully a couple years down the line, you'll be able to apply it and get your feet up into the real job world, whatever that may be.
Do you think that because of the environment we're in right now, it seems like a lot of musicians maybe might have more input as to what the face of their orchestra is like? I mean, you guys have been doing the mobile driving around playing. I can't remember what you called that.
The
The
bandwagon,
the
yes.
bandwagon. Very good name. You know, but do you feel like there with managements there could be more input from the musicians?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So one thing that I never learned in school is committee work, and so I've been doing a little bit of that now, and it's important, I think, for all of us to work together and to try to creatively come up with whatever solutions we can. You know, being part of an orchestra, whether you're a musician or you know an administrator, the common goal is to find this common goal of playing together and working together, and especially right now when everything's up in the air, we need all hands on deck to try to figure out whatever we can. So yeah, and you know, everybody has ideas. We're creative people. That's why we're in this industry, and so being able to have those conversations is important.
It's probably a lot different than pre-pandemic when sometimes it's just do your job and go home, right? Now there has to be a concerted effort about the visibility and the creativity
Yeah,
of keeping the ensemble in front of people.
yeah. I mean, going back to that Petrushka production that we did with all the costumes and all this extra stuff. I remember a lot of the older members in the orchestra were very much against it. They were like, "I'm getting paid to play my instrument, and that's it. I don't want to stand up and have to dance around. I don't want to have to wear a costume on stage. I didn't sign up for that." Um, and I remember thinking like, but it's fun. like don't you want to have fun? And that was sort of like, I think for me, seeing a little bit of a shift in the modern day orchestral musician, and it's not just necessarily playing your instrument, but it's about inspiring the next generation. It's about, you know, educating people, and it's about finding other creative ways to make an impact in your community, however that is. But I think there's a lot more we can do than just sit in the orchestra and play.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly the concerts, the Christmas concerts you guys did with I love the dreidel hat, or the menorah hat, I should say, right? That was great, you know. But it's those kind of things that keep the orchestra in front. I mean, you guys have certainly kept a presence, you know. Plus, how cold was it? What was it? The Today Show you guys played or something?
Yeah, that's right. That was the coldest I have ever been playing the trumpet, and I know all these, you know, the military band folks are laughing at me, and all the DCI folks or the marching band folks are laughing at me like, oh come on. But I wore long underwear.
Did you play
um,
a plastic mouthpiece?
I don't have a classic mouthpiece. No, it was cold. The mouthpiece was cold, and it was we had to. There were all sorts of challenges that day. We showed up. I set my alarm, I think, for 3:45 in the morning. We had to show up, get at Lincoln Center at 5, get driven over to Rockefeller Center to play. And with COVID, we had a dress rehearsal, sort of sound check at 6 o'clock in the morning, before the sun came up. And I remember the Rockefeller Center tree, the lights turn on at 6 o'clock, I believe. And so we were standing, and when we first got outside, out onto the plaza there were no lights on the tree. And then all of a sudden they all lit up. And I was like, oh, that's so magical. Um, and that was cool in my like bleary eyed, like half awake
Yeah.
state. But because of COVID too, there was no like green room. There was no place for us to hang out inside. So we all had to sit in the car that drove us over there. So it was not the ideal circumstance for playing our best, but it was an amazing experience. And again, you learn, and these are all part of the mental games, like we talked about.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. I'm glad we had that experience.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of ran out of my questions, but but I'm really and as I'm slowly signing off here, stay on after this, but thanks so much for doing this, Ethan, and it's always great to hear you and the playing this summer was inspiring to people, and as I'm sure you'll hear for years from that.
Thank
And
you. Appreciate it.
yeah.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, super. And thanks for everybody that watched. And again, I want to thank my sponsors, Dylan Music and Euclid IQ. And please go to Studio 259 Productions to buy the Chickowitz books, because we have a new website and it was not designed by a professional, but I hope you like it anyway. I did it. So, but thanks again, Ethan, so much. And I'll sign off on Facebook. And thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks.